Basketball fans, welcome back to this week's edition of KBF Weekly. But before we start, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get notified, and without further ado, and that out of the way, let's just get into it. So Friday night, in Friday night basketball, we had two games. We had the ZTech Sparks versus the Storms, and we had Ulinzi versus Umoja. So the ZTech Sparks, they came out and beat the Storms team 45-26. So the Storms versus ZTech game was too boring to watch. There's a reason as to why that game was just had an empty gym and there was nobody watching that game, and it was just full of mediocre basketball for 2 hours. And the Storms team just didn't look like they want to be there. They just didn't look. They looked mentally short and they were not prepared for this game. And ZTech didn't have a good game at all. Nothing was going on for them, but they were able to win this game. And it was a very low scoring game. This final score is like that score that you see on halftime. But anyway, the Storms team just leave a lot to be desired. Sometimes I just looked at this game and I just said, they should have just asked for a walkover, because that Storms team and the way they played was an absolute joke. It was a pathetic performance, and it was relegation basketball at its peak. Then in the second game of the evening, just to close out the evening, you had Ulinzi versus Umoja. So the Ulinzi Warriors beat the Umoja team. The final score was 54-37. So this was so one-sided. The Ulinzi Warriors just dominating. So also the Ulinzi Warriors versus Umoja was also a boring game for Friday night basketball. So this Friday night slots deserve teams that are competitive and have legit people who are following. So the view model for Friday night is that team has to have a bit of clout so that they can be able to make it as entertaining, because the Nyayo gym on Friday was empty. It was so quiet, it was so silent. There was nothing going on. So the Ulinzi Warriors have a very weak fan base and they can't draw people. So that whole Friday night slot should have a team that is a legit draw and have people that are following. That's the reason as to why those games were very underwhelming. So at the time, it seems like the Kenya Basketball League is okay with having Premier Leagues playing in an empty gym, but all in all, the games were just underwhelming. But on Sunday, we also saw the Ulinzi Warriors in action, and they took down the UN Terror team to go up 2-0. So Ulinzi versus Terror, Ulinzi ended that game 62-55, just to round out the weekend with a 2-0 record for them. So Ulinzi top four as usual, and they just finalized this weekend with a 2-0 record. And on Saturday in Eldoret, we had the USIU team. Both the men's and women's team were active. USIU, they beat the Eldonets team 71-52. That's on the women's side. And also on the men's side, they were actually quite good, because not only did the women's team deliver a good performance, but also the men's team beat the Eldonets team 75-70 to just round out the whole matchup. And it was such an interesting thing to watch, as the Eldonets team just did not find a way to defend home court. And that's one thing that they really, really struggle at. And if they can't be able to defend home court, what makes them think that they can be able to even dominate when they play outside Eldoret? So that was actually one thing that was glaring. Then on Saturday, we had the Strathmore Blades versus the KU Pirates. So the KU Pirates are in relegation mode. They lost this game 70-49. So, and also looking at the way the KU Pirates are, having the most worst record in KBF, they also played against the Thunder on Sunday, which was so one-sided, and they were no threat to the Thunder's unbeaten record. So the KU Pirates, they're the worst team in the league. They're just similar to the Detroit Pistons in the NBA. So moving on, we had two games that were quite interesting in the card. We had KPA versus the Equity Hawks. And prior to the games, we had a couple of things being said by Coach Ojuku and assistant coach Samba Bola. She had some things to say before the game. So prior to the women's clash, the KPA versus Equity Hawks clash, Coach Ojuku had this to say. So He said, "We will just approach the game like any other game. We are still the favorites. Equity is a good team. We also had a good team. So these are two great teams. We expect to have a good game through the match against ZTEC, though the match against ZTEC exposed us a little bit in some areas, but I believe I have worked on them in the last 3 days during training here in Nairobi, so we are prepared for them." So the Dockers, who enjoy an unbeaten run, still sit on top of the table with 32 points after playing 16 matches and winning all, while the Bankers have 26 points from 14 matches after winning 12 and losing 2. So in response, the Equity Hawks assistant head coach Samba Mjomba agreed with Ojuku, predicting a difficult but entertaining match. So she had this to say: "It will be a good match. KPA had a couple of experienced players whom we respect. Our plan as a technical team is to have our players gain experience for the next games, building up to the playoffs. We shall be using ears depending on how the game will flow, and I'm sure we will not disappoint, and it will give our girls the confidence they need to face the playoffs." So that game ended 57-55, and even despite the slow start from both teams, especially on the Equity side, so they were already just looking dead in the water in the first quarter. But as the game continued heading on into the fourth quarter down the stretch, Equity had a valiant effort to make this game close, and at some point that game will have gone to overtime, but it was decided by 2 points by 1 bucket. So it was a clash between two of the top teams in the women's division. So the Equity Hawks, they've had a poor performance and a poor record against KPA, dating back to the quarterfinals matchup in the Africa Women's Basketball League, which we covered extensively, where KPA beat the Equity Hawks 81-66. And for years now, the Equity Hawks have always played second fiddle to the KPA Dockers, even with the roster changes on both the KPA team and the Hawks team this season. So the KPA Dockers and Equity Hawks, they met in the Makanda gym in January this year. The KPA Dockers beat the Equity Hawks 76-62, and this time where they met in the Nyayo Stadium, the situation was no different, as KPA still won 57-55 despite last-hitch efforts in the game by the Equity Hawks to win the ball game. So the Equity Hawks, they'll always just be number 2 to KPA. And also we had the Equity Dumas and the UN Terra team. They had a game, the Equity Dumas 59 to the UN Terra 52. So the UN Terra team went 0-2 this weekend, having lost to the Equity Dumas and the Ulinzi Warriors, 2 teams in the top 4 in the Kenya Basketball Premier League. So it was just another mid-table. It looked like a mid-table clash because this game was not as hyped. But the main game of the weekend that people really, really wanted to see the outcome was the eventual clash between the Thunder and KPA on Saturday, 8 p.m. prime time. So prior to this game, Brad Ibbs had this to say prior to the Thunder versus KPA matchup. So he said, and I quote, "To be the champs, we have to defeat the champs. Our guys have really focused this week and are working really hard. One of the things we have realized is that being undefeated really puts a target on our backs because every team that you face wants to give their best and end the unbeaten run. So I think my players have shown that they are able to win in a variety of ways and different circumstances, which makes me proud of them." And also he added on, "We know they really get good guards. They have some quick guards who defend the basketball well, and I think it has been a team that has been gelled together. I am sure they will be worthy opponents on Saturday night. We are looking forward to putting on a good show for ourselves and hopefully continue to show the kind of dynamic basketball that we are as the Thunder." So despite keeping a 100% record in the league, KPA posed zero threat, as the Thunder already beat KPA in the Makanda Gymnasium and blew them out by 20 points. Thunder won the first leg of that matchup in Mombasa last year, and this time it was no different, as the KPA Dogs, despite keeping a 100% record in the league, KPA posed no threat as the Thunder already beat KPA in the Makande Gym in Mombasa and blew them out by 20 points. So the Thunder won the first leg of the game of this matchup in December last year. This time it was no different, as the KPA Dockers men's team, they just got blown out in the Nyayo Gym by the Nairobi City Thunder. The Thunder went up 2-0 on KPA in the season series. So the final score of this game was 82-57. The KPA Dockers just lost this game in the fourth, and they just had some costly turnovers at the end down the stretch. So the KPA Dockers team are losers as long as Coach Cliff is the head coach. The beatdown that we saw on Saturday was worse than the beatdown last year at the Makande Gym. So the KPA Dockers are nothing more than just a Div 1 team with a large bank account, a middle tier team, a team far removed from the championship, the championship team that won last year, a team that is being coached by a loser coach who's a serial loser. Coach Cliff is a specialist in failing. And seen this time and time again, from the national team to the KPA Dockers team. So things fell apart from KPA when they let go of their best players and signed scrubs, especially with their major loss of Eugene Nderitu to the Equity Dumas. That one really set them back for years. So the KPA team was so weak that they got blown out by the Nairobi City Thunder, a team that missed their best player in the rotation, Albert Odero, out because of suspension. So the Thunder also went ahead and cleared the KU Pirates to go up 2-0 this weekend. The final score was 77-51. KU Pirates are just down bad. They are the worst team in the Premier League and posed zero threat to the Thunder's unbeaten run. But the true test for the Nairobi City Thunder is winning in the road to BAL and at least making it in the top three, because they shouldn't think the work is done and the work is over after they beat the KBF teams and win the KBF title. So in the past few months, they've racked up a lot of wins, but I feel like they're not tested yet in the BAL stage, in the road to BAL stage, where we will truly know how really good they are. And if they look as good, if it looks this good when they play in Kenya, how good do they look when they play other champions in other nations? So if the Nairobi City Thunder go unbeaten, win the KBF title and make history, and don't make top three in the road to BAL, this will go down as a failed season, because their expectation, the reason as to why they gathered all the assets and they pulled in all those resources to be able to get to that position, was not only to win the KBF title, but also to do their best in the road to BAL. The women's 3x3 team, Team Nyati, were on the move this weekend, and they departed on Saturday for Miramas, France, for preparations for the upcoming Universality Olympic qualifying tournament scheduled for Utsunomiya, Japan, from May 3rd to 5th, 2024. So Team Nyati, when they went there and they landed, they won their first stop, and the first stop of the series was in Saint Denis, France. So they won against Saint Denis 21-3. Comoros, they beat Comoros 21-9, and Lille 21-12. So these were much needed wins, as the last time they were in France, they had a poor outing, and in 7 3x3 games, they had a record of 2-5, 2 wins, 5 losses. So this time, they came out swinging and won stop one, starting out with a record of 3-0, something that is much needed, especially with the last time that they played, they didn't look good, but in this one, with the teams that they were presented to them, they were able to get the job done convincingly. So that's been your KBF weekly edition, and please be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, get notified, and I'm out. Peace.